Champaign County Agriculture Today with your host, Dennis Riggs.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Champaign County Today on the Farm. My name is Dennis Riggs. I'm your host for the program today. I'm a fourth-generation farmer here in Champaign County who is constantly looking for more ways to tell you, the public, about agriculture. I hope you'll stick with us for the next 30 minutes as we talk about important issues in agriculture and how they affect you, whether you live in the country, here in town, or maybe in a rural setting. With me today, we have some special guests. They're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to many of us. It's called urban sprawl. With us is Bob McLeese, and Bob, you're with the USDA National Resources Department. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that, where hometown is, and your background in how possibly the planning and urban sprawl affects your job.
Well, I grew up in a little town, Towanda, up in McLean County, outside of Bloomington, and went to school at Northern Illinois University, majored in geography and soils up there, and then went to Michigan State to graduate school. And I've been working in soil survey with the Natural Resources Conservation Service for about 33 years now in Michigan, South Dakota, Vermont, and Illinois. And in my job as state soil scientist, I'm responsible for the soil survey program, which is a good tool to use in planning. And also I'm responsible for our farm and ranch land protection program.
Fantastic. Good resource. Thanks for being with us. Cynthia Hoyle, you're with us today, and you have a title of Traffic Planning Consultant. Want to hear about how that title comes along? Where's hometown for you, and where's your education from?
Thanks for having me here today. Well, I'm originally from Oklahoma. I was born and grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, is where I went to college, and that's where I got my master's in regional and city planning. And I've been working for over 20 years now as a consultant, and transportation has been one of my primary areas of interest. And we moved here 4 years ago.
Very good. Well, welcome to our community. Glad to have you with us. I know
Thanks.
You've done some great work with the transportation issues of Champaign County. And last and not least, Brendan McGlinty, help me out with that. I want to say the right name. I know that you're a hometown gentleman. You're here. You're representing District 9 on the Champaign County Board. Tell us your background, where your home is, and tell us a little bit about District 9.
Sure. I'm an Urbana. I attended Urbana schools, and I graduated from Urbana High School, University of Illinois, Parkland College, all three. District 9 is basically from, I'll say, Lincoln Square area, south and east, into some of rural Urbana. Not much, but mostly southeast Urbana.
We're coming today from the council chambers of the Urbana City Council, which is right on the edge. Are we in your district right now?
Yes.
Hey, all right. Well, thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Absolutely.
Well, we're talking about urban sprawl. Champaign County is a huge county. It's 28 miles wide, 36 miles tall, has a whole bunch of good agricultural farmland, but it has less today than it had just a few years ago. And if you take a look back, and I've seen some maps of Champaign-Urbana many years ago, a big difference. Cynthia, let's start out with you. When you talk about the increase in size of Champaign County, and we've got a slide we're going to put up. When I think about a farmstead or a homestead, I think of a farmstead, and we have a slide that shows a farmstead that a lot of area around it. And of course, now we think of people when they're living, we're talking about high density, we're talking about multifamily, we're talking about a lot of people in a square mile. Out in Raymond Township, Section 9, where I live, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 houses in a square mile. How does that compare with in town, and what problems does that cause?
Well, I think that in Champaign County there's room for a broad range of densities. The area around the university has very high densities, in some cases densities as high as core of Chicago with all of the dorms and the multifamily. But when we're talking about sprawl, what we're really talking about is haphazard, low-density, single land-use developments that are auto-dependent. They consume a lot of energy and land, and there's a very high ratio of road surface to the development served. So the 4 or 5 houses you're talking about in a square mile don't necessarily fall in the category of sprawl. It depends on how it's developed.
Mm-hmm. Bob, when we talk about the demands on the land, when you have low density versus high density, how does the land react to this? What's it think about this this high density versus low density?
Well, most people, when you talk about sprawl, probably can't define it, wouldn't know how to define it, but they recognize it when they see it. Mm-hmm. And I think the land does too. you talk about putting the houses in a low-dense areas, shotgun approach, spread them out, and you're utilizing a lot of our natural resource, the soil resource and the farm resource, to do that. And then the extra infrastructure that comes along with that, the road systems, the utilities, it's all affecting, that natural resource of the soil resource. Mm-hmm. And then the increased automobiles that come along with sprawl obviously provides some pollution potential there.
Brendan, as far as your viewpoint on the county board, you've seen this county grow. We're a very prosperous area. There are a lot of people are moving to this area, and businesses are moving this area because there is economic growth here. How's that affected the county board, and maybe even specifically your district, in how land is utilized? Is there still room for development in District 9? There
is, but it's been bleeding south and bleeding east. We have a new Walmart on the east, and we have some new development in the south. Most of the land north and west of there is pretty packed as far as urban area, and so from the county board district, there is some new development, both from a housing standpoint and from a commercial standpoint. But from a Urbana city limits standpoint, you start pushing out on the mile-and-a-half jurisdiction beyond the city limits that. Where new development is going to have to occur after a certain amount of time. There are some gaps in there with regard to potential reuse of land. For example, the old Walmart, Kmart over at Sunnycrest is a potential reuse area. So there are some areas that aren't currently being used, but there's it has filled in pretty nicely over the years. Mm-hmm.
Well, Cynthia, we talk about sprawl, we talk about growth. What's the difference between those two?
Well, there are principles of smart growth. The Smart Growth Network gave us 10 principles, which I think are pretty good when they're talking about what is smart growth. And that's where you have a mix of land uses so that people don't have to drive everywhere they need to go. They have the choice of walking or biking to run errands or go to work. It takes advantage of compact building design. You create a range of housing options, not just one kind of housing. The communities are walkable. You also have distinctive communities with a strong sense of place so that communities retain their character. You preserve open space, farmland, and critical environmental areas. There's a variety of transportation choices, and you make development decisions that are predictable, fair, and cost-effective, and encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in the development process.
A lot of factors that enter into that. Well, Cynthia, just off the top of your head, and without putting anybody on the spot, can you give me an example of an area in Champaign County, well, not just limited to Champaign-Urbana, that you think has been good, organized development? And then on the other side of that, where's an area that people might understand that it was probably not done correctly due to past policies?
Well, the redevelopment that's been occurring in the two downtowns of Champaign and Urbana provides an opportunity for people to see what mixed-use development can look like. It's a very urban example, and I think probably everybody complains about North Prospect. That's an example of where development occurred before planning was really done, so that the only way you can move around is by automobile, and people are frustrated because that creates traffic congestion.
I tell you what, we see all the great growth that's going on here in Champaign County, but what a diverse difference between downtown Broadland, let's say where I had breakfast this morning, and North Prospect. I can't drive through North Prospect a week at a time without seeing something new and change. Yet in beautiful downtown Broadlands, things have not really changed much in the last 50 years that I can recall, and the older guys say it hasn't changed much before that. So it is a diversity of growth that's happening right here in Champaign County. Bob, as far as we know from the agricultural standpoint that we have to be concerned about farmland preservation. Cynthia said something about that. What do you think about what we have to do to preserve the land? Is it important, or should we not even worry about it? There's corn on the ground around some elevators here in the fall. Maybe we're growing too much corn. What do you think?
Well, I don't think we are. I think you have to stop and first consider that American agriculture contributes about $1 trillion to the gross domestic product, and 23 million people are employed in American agriculture. That's pretty significant. Here in Illinois, I think we're about $100 billion. So just from that standpoint, agriculture is very important. But then when you go beyond that and look at our soil resources, there's a little demonstration I'd like to show you.
Have you got your
If I
apple?
can- I've got
Folks,
my
you
apple.
got to watch
I've
this
got my
apple. This
apple.
is a fantastic
But
demonstration.
it just demonstrates the importance of our soil resources. And if you consider the apple as the earth, I guess the first question I'd ask you is how much of the world is oceans or water?
Go ahead, guys.
Little quiz here.
The vast majority.
Vast majority.
70%.
Very good. 75% is the right answer. But if you, using this little demonstration, and take the apple as the earth.
We're taking the water away.
Taking the water away. So
There's
here's
all
the
its water.
3/4 that are oceans. That leaves 25%, or 1/4 is land area. Now, if you take away the mountains, the deserts, the swamps, Antarctica, and the Arctic of this 1/4,
That cannot really sustain
they
life.
can't support
Crop
life,
growth,
life or crop growth. You take half of that away, which leaves us with, are you keeping track of this?
Well, I need to write this down. Help me out here.
We got one eighth of the world left,
Okay.
then that can support life and produce crops.
Okay.
Now, of that 1/8, now if you take a look at the areas that are too wet, or too rocky, or already urbanized, like Champaign-Urbana,
Like this
Bloomington,
building
Normal
sits on
Chicago,
right
like
now.
this building right here, you have to take away 3/4 of that, which leaves us with how much of the Earth's surface now?
How much? We're down to a
Doing
small
your math.
percentage.
1/32 of the Earth's surface.
That's it.
That's it. But to even take it one step further, if you look at that soil resource that really supports us and our life on Earth, it's just that skin of the apple that is feeding the world. So it is very important, I think, that we consider the soil resources when we look at this whole issue of urban sprawl and farmland preservation.
Well, Bob, we talk about the growth of the pavement and the foundations and the development that happens on top of farmland. Once that's been done, can Prospect Avenue ever grow corn again? I mean, if we had to?
No. That's
It's
the simple
it's
answer.
over.
That's it. That's it. The answer is no. It's next to impossible to bring that back to production once we've paved it over.
Well, it makes a big change in the way we plan in the future. Cynthia, as we're planning for growth here in Champaign County, what should we look for as far as organized growth so that we can maybe maintain the small percentage of land that is tillable? What should we do with the land around the area that we're developing to make it all work together?
Well, smart growth is what people talk about a lot, and that is planned growth. And one of the things that we can do is take a look at the best croplands in our county. And there could be programs developed that provide incentives and some controls to preserve those farmlands and natural areas that we deem are critical to maintaining a healthy ecosystem. And then the cities have to take into consideration other factors related to infrastructure, water and sewer, et cetera. So it takes a multi-pronged approach to make those decisions about where growth is going to occur. But if a community doesn't make the decisions about where they want growth to occur, then somebody else or other forces will make those decisions for us. So it behooves us to sit down and spend the time and energy to decide where we want growth to occur.
Well, Brendan, as the county board takes a look at development, as they allow zoning permits to be laid, that type of thing, what does that policy-making body consider? And has there been problems in allowing growth here and not here, or how has that policy-making body been affected?
One of the challenges from a county board standpoint is that we don't have a comprehensive plan for the county at this point. And Cynthia knows quite a bit about this with Big Small All establishing a vision for the county that will hopefully lead to a comprehensive plan for the county. Both Champaign and Urbana have comprehensive plans. I've been part of either working on or analyzing those over years and have served as a plan commissioner for the city of Urbana. But from a county standpoint, the real challenge is in trying to adhere to the zoning ordinance that exists when somebody wants to challenge one of the zonings, they would go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Zoning Board of Appeals would make a recommendation to the Environment and Land Use Committee. I sit on that. And then the ELUC committee would then make a recommendation to the full board for final decision on certain land issues. There are some real challenges with regard to, at this point, what would be considered to be spot zoning. Does it make sense to put a subdivision in a rural area? There have been more and more requests for that. What sort of land would that be sitting on? There are a lot of challenges with regard to that, and we need a comprehensive plan to do exactly what Cynthia referred to as some of that intelligent planning.
A question for Bob is that the soil types of Champaign County differ greatly. The slope, the infrastructure. Are there some areas, maybe not contiguous with the town, that could be developed and their best use would be for residential if we need that instead of farming? Or spot development a problem no matter what?
Well, there are. The problem we have here in Champaign County and much of central Illinois, though, is we have the best farm ground, best soils in the world, and there's the demand for growth. So, there lies the rub. You got the best soils, and you got growth, and you need growth. So almost anywhere we go, it's going to be on prime farmland soils. There are some soils that probably aren't as productive as some of our better ones that may be in that plan. We can be looking toward those areas that if we are going to develop, maybe we ought to go on those soil types that aren't the best of the best.
Cynthia, you talk about redevelopment and going inside the city. We see some great work being done both in Champaign and Urbana. Will that help us out? Is there enough room there to help us out on the short term? Is just a constant thing? How much relief can that give us?
Well, I think there's opportunity for redevelopment that might include some higher densities, mix of uses. You're still going to have greenfields development as well, and some people are confused about the fact that they think that all growth is sprawl, and that is not the case. Well-planned, coordinated growth can be efficient and provide people with housing choices, transportation choices, and preserve open space at the same time. One of the things I'd like to point out is that poorly planned growth costs governments a lot to serve. It's much more efficient to have development that can be accessed easily by services and infrastructure. And when you have things happening randomly and haphazardly, then the communities are always playing catch up.
Brendan, what would Champaign County look like if we had no growth? What would happen then?
If we had no
acreage that was being consumed for uses. In other words, if the farmland stayed the same percentage as the developed land, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
I would assume that we'd be, to some extent, based on what it looks like in the more urban or city areas as far as reuse, we'd probably be bulging at the seams to some extent. It's interesting to see how much the population has grown in the last 20 or 30 years, and what some people are projecting to be growth over the next 20 or 30. If you look at a county that has a little under 200,000 people, and you grow that by another 100,000, and you can picture it in Champaign, in Urbana, in Rantoul, in some of the other bulging other communities like St. Joe and Mahomet and others. The people are starting to pack into those areas. The subdivisions are starting to grow. And so, what will it look like? We'll be bulging a little bit more at the seams. We really need to look at having some contiguous development, some effective reuse of commercial space, certainly, but other multi-use, as Cynthia's referred to, in downtown areas as well.
People who are listening to us today are probably more in the urban areas of Champaign County. Are those people concerned about preservation of farmland, and should they be?
I think some are and some aren't. From a county board standpoint, what I've learned is that there seem to be two strong factions: those that are for landowner rights and for growth, urban growth, especially commercial growth, and those that are really concerned about preservation, conservation, preservation of farmland in particular. There are those that are in that camp that say, as Bob referred to, this is the best farmland in the world. We have a responsibility to preserve that. There are others that say, it's my land or it's someone else's land. They have the right to do whatever they want to do with it. And there's a challenge there when trying to bring the entire county together to do intelligent planning for future growth.
Cynthia, good planning heads off panic many times, and I don't think we're in a panic situation quite yet with our food supply. But how does the growth in some of these small communities? Good heavens, Broadlands has got 5 or 6 new houses. We're pretty proud of that down there. St. Joe, as you mentioned, Muhammad. How does that affect the transportation planning for Champaign County, that the small towns, as well as in town of the Champaign-Urbana, are growing also?
In the Big Small All process, the Transportation Committee is one of the biggest and most dedicated volunteer groups. We have about 20 people show up each time that committee meets, and we're meeting once a month over 6 months. And what we heard during the process, we've had over 1,000 people participate in Champaign County in this process. And everywhere they went, they heard some of the same themes. And one of them was that people want better transportation options. In the smaller communities, they would like to have better transit connections between communities and to the Champaign-Urbana area. There's a call for a countywide bike and pathway system. So people are feeling that in order to maintain that sense of community and connectedness, we need to have more transportation options, because having everybody transported by single occupancy vehicles doesn't work well when you're older and you can no longer drive, when you're younger and you can't drive yet, when you become disabled, or any number of variety of things that prevent you from operating a vehicle means that you are stranded. And so a lot of people are calling for having better connectivity, is sort of the word in the transportation industry, that allows people choices in transportation.
Do you think that the economics of the situation will drive it more than the policy of this type of more efficient transportation, or will it take economics to bring that to the forefront?
Well, I presume you're referring to the increasing price of gasoline.
You got it.
And that certainly does have an impact in countries that have made decisions at their national level to reduce their dependence on single occupancy vehicles, usually because of congestion issues. They increase the cost of gas through taxation. And the other thing we're seeing now, of course, is that the demand for petroleum is going up worldwide, and it doesn't look like it's going to go down. So chances are that as we look into the future, we're going to need to make more efficient choices about our transportation system, because it's going to become more and more expensive. It's very expensive now for families to operate and maintain vehicles, and it's probably not going to get any less expensive.
Well, as we plan, Bob, and we take a look at the USDA and the role of the NCRS, what do you folks bring to the table as far as helping a city like Champaign-Urbana, or even maybe some of the small towns, plan their growth and the factors that they should weigh? I know a lot of people think of the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, that's farming. Are you involved in the planning of urban development also?
Well, we assist the Natural Resources Conservation Service with our partners in each county, the soil and water conservation districts, provide expertise for conservation planning, natural resources planning with the communities in their comprehensive plans. We have, again, I mentioned the tool, the soil survey, that is a very valuable tool in the beginning of most plans, is looking at that soil resource. Mm-hmm. And it just might throw out too that if the viewers are interested, just get on the internet and Google Web Soil Survey, and we have digital soils information available for almost every county in the United States.
I see you brought with you the book for Champaign County. This is a tremendous resource. I know I've used it many times. And
I thought you might pull this one out, the 1918 one.
I don't. My grandpa's probably got one of those, but I don't. This I have a copy of. What is this book, and what can it do for someone, either town or in the rural areas?
Well, it is a great resource because it provides an inventory of the soil resources, and if we are going to plan our growth, the first place, or one of the first places we need to look is at the soil resource. So this provides the soil survey information, the different properties of the soils for urban development are all included in this soil survey report.
Brendan, as you see Champaign County grow, what are the things that the county board are thinking of as far as making that growth organized, that we can not have some of these problems that Cynthia refers to? Are there some things in place that we're looking at?
You know, one of the challenges, Dennis, is having an up-to-date plan to work from. I know that when I was on Plan Commission in Urbana, I sat right over here and we worked off of an aged plan. It was 25, 30 years old when I was on that commission. When it got updated, it was a blessing, because we were able to work off of updated information information. Along the same lines, we're working off of an old zoning ordinance from a county-wide level that has some problems, and we are working to fix them. But like I mentioned earlier, there are some challenges with regard to those two factions I mentioned earlier, the landowners' rights folks, the development folks, and the preservation folks, and the farmers. And so when we're planning in the future, we really need to come together as a county with a comprehensive plan that everyone can live with, a zoning ordinance that we can live with, and then guide our policies from there, so that we're not looking at a subdivision in Philo and saying, well, should it go in rural Philo, outside of Philo? Should it go there? Does it make sense for it to go there? We need to have a plan in place where that is essentially on autopilot. We know that it should or should not go there because the plan is in place and the community and the county has bought in.
Are farmers as well as farm communities affected by this planning also?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really a mix. While most of the population in Champaign County is in the urban areas, from a county board standpoint, we need to be listening to everyone and be looking at this from a responsibility standpoint now and in the future, so that future policymakers can make intelligent, informed decisions about preserving the good land that we have, because we are running out and we only have that little sliver left. And so these sort of things are what we're looking at in the future.
Well, Cynthia, is there such a thing as we just won't grow anymore? Is it a possibility that will get to a point and we'll just have to stop?
Well, they've tried that in California. It hasn't worked very well. Stasis is a very unusual state in organic systems, and you're usually either growing or declining. So I think what we have to focus on is sustainable development and smart growth, so that our growth can take care of our children in the future.
Can you give me a couple of examples of disasters, of things that happen, not here, but in other areas where lack of planning has caused public dilemmas?
Yes, there have been communities in which they did not take a look at the soils, and they ended up with problems with buildings that were moving and sliding. I mean, look at what goes on in California with houses sliding off the side of hills. And erosion problems, fire problems. It's no coincidence that we have more problems now with wildfires, because when you go out and build in the middle of the wilderness, you're likely to be in the path of wild things like wildfires.
Well, Bob, in just a couple of seconds, are farmers involved in this process, and should they be? Can they help out?
Oh, you bet. And as Brendan said, it's a public participation that has to make it work. And until we have all the players at the table and all the players coming to some kind of consensus, it's not going to work. And farmers, obviously, in a county like Champaign, where agriculture is king, they have to be involved, will be involved, and I think are involved.
And that's why we're glad the viewers were involved with us today. We thank you for listening to Champaign County Agriculture Today. We hope you'll give comments by calling the Farm Bureau, who's helped put these together, and let us know what topics you'd like researched for the panel. And thank you all for your help today. I'm Dennis Riggs, your host. Thanks for watching.
Champaign County Agriculture Today is brought to you by Champaign County Farm Bureau.